Disclaimer, this is a full spoiler review. I have completed my first Like a Dragon game recently, and I would like to talk about it. As a bit of background, I've only partially played one game before this one, Yakuza Kiwami. I played up until around chapter 4 or 5 before dropping the game. I enjoyed the game's setting and overall vibe, but the gameplay at the time wasn't clicking with me, either with side content or the main thing. It was good, but not that good. Flash forward a bit, and I've decided to give Like a Dragon a go, hoping a genre change-up would give me a new perspective on the series. Thankfully, I think it succeeded at that. I hope to give a perspective on this game from someone new to the series, and give some insight to both other new players and series veterans alike on what I think works. To begin with, here's the story in one sentence. After spending 18 years in jail for taking the fall for a murder, Ichiban Kasuga must discover the truth behind his mentor's betrayal in the midst of a political battle for the soul of Japan. As a disclaimer ahead of time, my thoughts on the story may read like a list of somewhat disconnected things. I'm not confident in my ability to tie everything super neatly at the moment, so apologies in advance. This game effectively has three major plot lines: Ichiban's search for the truth about Arakawa's betrayal, Ryo Aoki's and Bleach Japan's political manoeuvring, and the Cold War between the gangs of the Jinsho. On top of that, it has the meta context of being a soft reboot for the series with a brand new protagonist and setting, and therefore needs to be approachable for people new to the series as well. It is to the writer's credit that despite this complex web of story events, it's easy to follow, and that when these plot lines intersect, they do so naturally. I think it's a smart choice that, for a new protagonist, a significant part of the plot involves him being dropped into an unfamiliar location while being forced to start his life anew, the live and let die technique. I like how once we get to a Jinsho, we get several chapters dedicated to various societal problems, the disdain for sex workers and the homeless, society's mistreatment of the elderly, the weak support systems for the unemployed. This way, when the political and personal drama returns to the forefront, it becomes more urgent and immediate, which is noteworthy as the struggle to show off the micro-level impacts of politics is common in works. Chapter 11 is maybe the best example of this in action. On paper, this is a dry expositional chapter in which Aoki explains his plans. This could easily end up divorced from emotion and a dull moment. So what the game does is bring back Hamako to give Aoki's actions some personal scale context. She agrees to support Bleach Japan's shelters for sex workers. We then hear the truth about these shelters and part of Aoki's motive rant, and the chapter ends with Hamako discovering that the woman she tried to help are in the deportation process, and rages at her decision. We get to see the micro-level consequences of the villain's actions, and this moment works all the better for it. The story in general is very character-driven rather than event-driven, which I think is reinforced by the very naturalistic way many of these scenes are shot and exposited. I'm not a huge fan of the sheer number of scenes in this story of people sitting down and discussing their plans, but it is at least presented in a very distinctive way. Ichiban's big fan of RPGs and hero stories manifests as him seeing battles through the lens of RPG tropes. That's how the battles and wacky visuals within them are justified. I do feel like this could maybe have come through in the main story a lot more. The only place it really comes up is in his bout against Kiryu, where he has this fantasy sequence. Maybe that moment would feel a lot more natural if he had more moments like it throughout the game. For what is treated like a major quirk of his personality, it's surprisingly irrelevant to the actual story. I think I was actually expecting to write in this review that I don't like the Arakawa twist. Ichiban's arc is about found family, how he has settled down with a group of close friends, and that blood ties don't matter to that. The post-credit scene of Ichiban refusing a DNA test saved it for me. It's a very sweet scene that completes his character arc and makes the twist a lot better. I have somewhat mixed thoughts on Jinsho as a setting for the story. It's fun to explore and do things in, and has plenty of scenery variety. It's a world I never got bored in. However, I do think this setting is missing a bit of edge. This game is meant to take you to the red light districts of cities, where vice and crime go hand in hand. I just don't get that from how it's presented in this game. These places actually seem very cosy to wander around and do things in, as most sub-stories are about wacky personal issues, and the only real threat comes from very gamified combat encounters. Maybe that's part of the point. This game's message is about how society needs grey zones that people can exist within. But I don't know, I think this game could do a better job at showing how a Jincho at least feels like a place on the edge of society, instead of just a high street with some cabaret and strip clubs nearby. A little story for the conclusion of this video, but I have begun playing the first Yakuza game, and that game really sells you on Kamurocho as a dangerous sin city where everyone is out to either scam or kill you. Like a Dragon needs a bit of that energy. On that topic, I obviously can't vouch for these characters and how they reflect their past, but the use of older characters is very tasteful. They don't overshadow the new cast, but get their chances to shine. I think Majima and Sejima's small role is the real highlight here, a bit more on that in the gameplay section. But to move on to character writing, this game has a really killer set of main characters, supporting players and villains. As an aside, I do like how this is a very mature and middle-aged cast, and how it actually reflects in the general issues they face. The Sunlight Castle subplot likely wouldn't be as effective if this was a cast of teenagers. Through that lens, I think Kume stands out as so young is an interesting creative choice. This type of character I think would usually be a much older traditionalist character, so him and the rest of Bleach Japan being so youthful certainly leaves a lot to interpretation. Misato is a fantastic dark side of the protagonist villain, a perfect example of how to have a character with both personal and thematic relevance to the story, to a level where he overshadows the still entertaining henchman throughout. Having both him and Ichiban come up with similar disadvantaged backgrounds, but completely different outcomes leads to a great character conflict. Speaking of henchmen, worst plot point awards goes to how I don't like how the finale hinges on a brand new mysterious assassin character, and agreeing to use his near supernatural power to help the protagonist expose Misato. It's a hilariously clunky way of getting to a plot line that really should be simple. Misato's already done lots of bad stuff. There's absolutely no other way of recording him in secret. Finally, Ichiban is a joy as a protagonist. My one complaint about him I've addressed earlier with how inconsistent his RPG vision is, but he's a fun personality with genuine heart and a compelling backstory. That could maybe describe most of the main party. Even what I consider to be the weakest party member, Namba, is still a good character. I feel his character arcs trip over each other a bit, like the stuff about his brother undoes some of the commentary on homelessness, and that his nursing backstory seems to exist to dunk on his life some more. Would certainly like another take on it. This video is going into intermission to bring you this mini essay. I am not a video game channel, with my main focus being on railways and urban issues. I don't want to leave that out of this video entirely, so enjoy this mini essay that combines the two. I am well aware that trying to compare Like a Dragon to Grand Theft Auto is a bit of a faux pas, but I think there is something to how the two games approach their city designs in ways that is heavily influenced by Japan versus the United States. The Yakuza games take place in dense city districts that you can transfer on foot. The GTA games take place in entire cities and surroundings that are scaled for getting around via car. That difference in scale, one very relevant to the real world, vastly changes how these games play and present themselves. A fact among games of all kinds is that suburban sprawl isn't interesting. In Grand Theft Auto 5's Los Santos, for example, this is the extent of the map's representation of suburban sprawl in the famously sprawling Los Angeles. To realistically portray the suburbs, vast areas of the map would need to be covered with repetitive scenery in both appearance and function. In that sense, Yakuza vs GTA is a reflection of real-world density issues. Yakuza can package so much in a relatively tiny area because it is scaled for a human. GTA can't have that level of detail because it needs to accommodate the fact that you are driving past it in a car. My favourite moments in GTA have actually been those moments that suddenly make the world feel small, and the things you need to do local to your safe house. The opening of GTA 4, being dumped into Angel Pine and San Andreas, all stand out to me as highlights. If the differences between these games have ever caused people to consider the relationship between density and transport options in the real world, that's a small win. This is going to be the biggest hot take in this video. I do not care for the music in this game, and would actually go as far as say that the game's soundtrack as a whole is kind of bad. Here are my genuine highlights. Namba's theme that plays during his reunion moment is really nice. It fits his character, fits the emotions of the scene, and is what I wish his game sounded like more often. Majima and Sejima's battle theme is also great, getting you amped up for the battle and being really catchy. After those two songs, things get iffy. This is one of those games that can't settle on a sound, and by trying to do everything, the music just coalesces into a generic mush of rock and electronic themes that aren't memorable for any reason other than repetition. The ending is the perfect example of this. Ichiban and Arakawa are selling the heck out of the game's emotional climax, and it's backed by this bland guitar track that doesn't fit the scene at all. This is genuinely a moment that would work better with no music, just letting the city ambience and the echo of a shelter there under highlight the emotion. Then the credits hit and we smash cut into one of the most jaw-droppingly misjudged ending themes in history. Maybe a brag rap about how cool Ichiban is would work better after this scene. It absolutely doesn't after this one. It's a symptom of a soundtrack that's trying too hard to be quirky and different and just turns out sleepy. This game should embrace the excellent sea ambience more and have the music be an extension of that, rather than being so jumbled and disconnected from everything else. As a comment on production value, I think the core of Like a Dragon's appeal is its mix of extreme polish and attention to detail, and it's my first Unreal Engine project works. I think everyone can list off a bunch of quirks in these games. The way this one road setting is completely empty, how bystanders will stop and turn around when they're an exact distance away from your conversation, how road traffic all follow an exact predetermined route in a convoy, the way there's like 5 different styles of cutscenes. Always love the slideshow one for its uncanny ability to just make everybody look weird no matter the context. The game's cinematography and style is good for the most part. Just, okay, one more moment nitpick. When Kiryu makes his grand return, this guy gets decked from someone off camera. We get Ichiban's reaction, then Majima and Sejima's. Who is it? Then he gets this grand hero shot as the camera pans up and the music builds. Classic stuff. So what the heck is this shot from the very start of that sequence? Is the reveal meant to be structured around us waiting in anticipation to see who this sunglasses guy is? It just feels like a weird way to shoot this scene. Okay, comments about production value over, onto the gameplay. Like a Dragon, of course, is the big series shake-up as it introduces a turn-based RPG style of combat for its core gameplay. It uses a job system in which each character can freely switch between classes, being able to keep some skills and stats permanently, encourages you to switch around and experiment. The positives. Combat is engaging. The way the turn-based stuff is presented as freeform and akin to the classic series fights mostly works. There's a wide variety of classes and attack types to use, and for the most part enemy weaknesses determine your battle plans, especially late in the game. Not all of these classes are made equal, but a well-equipped party is very fun to deploy. On the grind, I find it very reasonable for the most part. I'm aware that this can often be the point of resistance for many players, but I didn't feel like I needed to spend lots of time fighting to keep up with the story, with maybe one big exception. Thoughts on the Majima fight. This is a notoriously difficult spike, and I get why it exists. It's a test to see that you are capable of exploiting multiple weaknesses and have good healing and support skills. I think the problem is more so that the game just tosses you into the deep end, which hurts if you haven't messed with the job system much, which hasn't been a mandatory part of getting through the game before it. Hopefully the extremes of this kind of difficult spike is better managed in the sequel. I think there are 2 big noteworthy negatives about how regular gameplay works. The first is the general struggles the game has at times in enabling battles to take place in open areas where characters can autonomously move around. It is annoying to have an attack that attacks in an area, and it doesn't fully work because characters have just wandered out of place, or for characters to struggle to navigate a fence to get to their opponent, or for an attack to miss because a random building edge was in the way. I'm pretty sure this characters kick objects towards the opponent's thing has either missed or hit someone in my own party more often than it has actually hit an enemy. I think my one big hope for Infinite Wealth is that this aspect of the battle system gets some polish. Attacks shouldn't miss in a turn-based RPG because characters you can't control were standing just barely out of position. The second negative is that, at higher levels, the list of viable party compositions does become significantly standardised. The limited amount of healing options you have means that Seiko as an idol becomes a non-negotiable. Junji Han, meanwhile, is a complete powerhouse, has every type of attack, hits hard, and is also an essential pick. You can't deselect Ichiban, so your final slot just goes to either Adachi or Zao. Nabe isn't tanky enough to survive high-end encounters, and Eri's effectiveness does come back down to earth after around the mid-game, since the process of developing your characters getting those transferable skills and stats in place is quite fun. My hunch, just speculation as of right now, is that Infinite Wealth may feature a system where both Ichiban and Kiryu both have their own static parties, so I'm hoping that will be an opportunity to focus more on the character building side rather than party management. I think that's my overall stance on the gameplay. It's good, especially for a first try at making an RPG, and I think Infinite Wealth should solve some of the rough edges. Subscribe to find out if it does. How the Like a Dragon games are paced isn't a big secret. When you want to take a break from the main story, you have a whole selection of side content and minigames to enjoy, and when you're sick of that, you can go back to the main story. Though not without its nitpicks, I think this formula works well within Like a Dragon. I won't go over everything, but most of the minigames are fun distractions from the main content, and if you're going by achievement completion metrics, more 9 a second, don't overstay their welcome. I won't say that this is the best side content any game ever, but I'll admit, learning how to play Mahjong was really satisfying. The side stories are also generally okay. There's roughly 50 of them, which is surprising because it doesn't feel that way. There are certainly some clunkers among the side stories. I think these work best when they're down to earth and such. My personal standards are likely the Tour Guides one, Charity Girl, Fruit Tree, the Korean Actor one, and Kimchi, which are all a good mix of funny and heartwarming. I guess the one complaint I've raised is one of the dissonance between character motivations between the main story and everything else. Is Ichiban a fan of Mahjong or Blackjack? Yeah, I can see it. I don't really buy, however, that he would be spending hours on these hangouts during the events of this game's main story. The exception to that, and I think a very underrated side thing in this game, is the vocational school. The idea of Ichiban doing classes and exams in his spare time to improve himself is really sweet, and it's a perfect example of how side content gives extra depth to characters, while also not feeling completely divorced from the main plotline. To cover the major bits of side content, maybe all my days of playing Blur just paid off, but I didn't really enjoy Dragon Kart. Its core is fine, but it's just too easy in my experience. I think it just really needs a blue shell mechanic for the rest of the game to click. I think Ichiban Holdings management is in a similar boat. The engine building part of the game is kind of fun, but once you get to the point where it's just your money printer, it becomes something you grind while not fully paying attention to it. I think it would have been improved if the business made money passively based on how you've set up your staff investments, maybe with some diminishing returns to still encourage you to check in. I think that makes both gameplay and thematic sense. It reduces the amount of idling the player needs to do, and businesses don't stop making money just because the owner isn't micromanaging it, and it solves the question of just how much time is meant to be passing between each shareholder meeting. I think that leads to the last noteworthy complaint about this game, the completion requirements. I think if you're going for trophy or achievement requirements, the 100% criteria is quite reasonable. The part-time hero criteria, less so. It's the kind of checklist that demands that you play an absurd amount over what you need to play everything. It's just weird that the game has 2 completion metrics, and that one is very sensible while the other isn't. I have completed the game, of course, and also done the final Millennium Tower, which I think for people who aren't hyper-completionists is a perfectly good last challenge to enjoy with the game. Maybe I'll come back to this in the future and tick off the true final Millennium Tower, but for now, I'm good. I know there's a mini debate among lad fans about what game new players should start with. This is now a series that has 11 games and counting the Kaito files, with 2 on the horizon, and that's not counting remakes or spin-offs. So I guess if I could add to the conversation using my personal experiences with this game, here is my pitch for why Like a Dragon is a good one to start with. It's a soft reboot. You can play this game, be on a reasonable starting field, and enjoy new games as they come out without feeling the pressure of needing to rush through an almost 2-decade backlog of content to understand what is going on. I think that makes this game a valuable entry point if you're not a fan of beat-em-ups, or you don't have the time to go through a dozen games. You can get a fun time with a likeable cast of characters and a story that doesn't rely on prior knowledge to be enjoyed. That is a very good thing. My initial plan for continuing this series is to wait until Like a Dragon Gaiden later this year, since that's a direct follow-up to this game. That's a wait, so I've opted to go back to the source, and as of this writing of the script, I've begun playing Yakuza Restored. I plan to make a video like this for each game in the series that I complete, what I expect may be a very strange playthrough order. I'll continue my usual content, of course, this will just be an occasional extra, so stay tuned for that, and thanks for watching.